Hello and welcome to Stage Door Live, a brand new web programme for the community of artists here in Ireland. My name is Amy Kidd, I'm an actor and I'll be your host this evening. When the director Kevin Michael Reid came to me and he said that he thought he wanted to create a space where you could get all of the latest headlines and hot topics from the arts community in one place, I thought that it was a great idea. So every week I'll be giving you a little news roundup of arts related hot topics, and I'll be speaking with some guest speakers that live and work here in Ireland. We hope you enjoy the show. Tonight I'll be talking to David Horan, the artistic director of Bewley's Cafe Theatre, and to Caitriona Daly, whose play Normal opened the refurbished Bewley's in 2018. Bewley's has served as an incubation space for artists like Caitriona, but is now faced with potential closure. We'll then be joined by writer, director and producer Peter Reid, who will be announcing an exciting initiative to stage new writing as we transition out of lockdown. Lastly, we'll be speaking to London-based director Sara Joyce about her choice to train and make work abroad, touching on some of the differences for theatre artists between Ireland and the UK. I'm Amy Kidd, and this is Stage Door Live for the 27th of May 2020. Hello again everyone, welcome back to Stage Door Live. Before we kick things off with a little news recap as per usual, I wanted to say a quick thank you to all of you who have already liked us on Facebook, subscribed on YouTube and retweeted and shared and all of that great stuff. For tonight's episode you can use the hashtag Cultivating New Theatre Artists if you are so inclined, because we love hearing from you and seeing all of your excellent questions for our guests. So please do keep them coming because we have another great lineup for you tonight. But first, here are those headlines from this week. Earlier today, the National Campaign for the Arts released a 13-point proposal for a national arts recovery programme. The proposed plan is broken down into solutions for the immediate future as well as medium and long-term considerations. The NCFA calls on several government departments and the Arts Council to take actions such as extending the COVID-19 emergency payment and the wage subsidy scheme until it is financially and logistically viable for arts and culture events to take place. The plan also urges lawmakers to consider the long-term benefits of a universal basic income, citing their 2020 survey, which found that 72% of artists working in Ireland were earning less than minimum wage pre-COVID. You can find the full proposal on the NCFA's website, and as always, we will be dropping a link in the description of this show later tonight. On Tuesday, the Arts Council published a new booklet detailing the support available to the arts sector in response to the COVID-19 crisis. The booklet includes a statement from Minister Josepha Madigan, information on the existing financial support schemes for individuals and businesses, and contact information for anyone with queries. You can find the booklet on the Arts Council's website and linked in the description of this show. Last week, we were joined by Benjamin Perchet, Artistic Director of Dublin Dance Festival, who announced the full lineup of events for the digital capsule starting this Friday. The programme consists of 10 days of movement and 3 moments of connection, and includes an augmented reality dance experience, a DJ set for kids with Donald Deneen, and the Modes of Capture Symposium, which explores how dance artists exchange knowledge and experiences across extended networks and through multiple generations that span distance and time. All events are free of charge, but some do require registration, so check out dublindancefestival.ie for more information. The Abbey Theatre have announced further postponements and cancellations to planned productions and tours. Several shows have been postponed indefinitely, while others simply will no longer proceed as scheduled. Directors of the Abbey, Graham McLaren and Neil Murray, said, "We appreciate the continued support and understanding of the theatre community, our colleagues, audiences and funding partners, whilst we navigate the continued impact of COVID-19 and social distancing on our programme. You can find the complete list of disrupted productions at abbeytheatre.ie." In a new director's blog on Monday, newly appointed Director of the Arts Council, Maureen Kennelly, reminded us that all over the world, beautiful events appear in front of us on screens, most often entirely free. She went on to say, "Let's make sure that this new-ish way of experiencing beautiful pieces of art doesn't further compound the oft-held belief that artists can actually live on thin air." With the Arts Council under pressure to work with the government to provide additional support and funding opportunities to artists and arts workers, Kennelly's blog post is a reassurance that discussions are ongoing and hopefully headed in the right direction. And now, in keeping with this week's theme of cultivating new theatre artists, we have a special feature from a member of our own team here at Stage Door Live. In addition to being our news researcher and writer, Hilary Desminski is a founding member of the Corps Ensemble, who recently opened the Bohemian Theatre in Phibsborough, pre-pandemic. Our guest correspondent, Kelly O'Doherty, is here to tell us some more about that.
We are here with a wonderful lady who has many strings to her bow. She is a creative producer, a director, a playwright, and of course, a member of the Corps Ensemble. How are you keeping, Hilary?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, hanging in there, I think.
Yeah.
So, Hilary, in late 2019, the Corps Ensemble opened up the Bohemian Theatre in Phibsborough. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what your goals are for the theatre and how the mission of the ensemble will be supported by having an incubation space, as it were?
And we started off kind of based in UCD, just doing workshops that were mostly focused on physicality, and just what came out of that was that we really wanted to be together all the time. We were very lucky in that when we started, we kind of had a space in the Viking Theatre in Clontarf. We did a lot of work there for our first year. And then we started to travel out to other theatres and do some touring. And we've been kind of looking for a place that we can call our own, where we can rehearse. We can basically just have the run of the place. And we were very lucky that we met the owners of the Bohemian in Phibsborough. They're amazing. And they very generously said, well, we have some space upstairs. No one's really using it right now. So work away. And it was
fantastic.
It was
so
incredible.
You guys have a place that you're calling it home now, I guess. A
Exactly.
little home for your theatre family.
Yeah, and we have been kind of, as you said, incubating things there since probably around summer of last year. And we had our kind of grand opening last fall in October. And it was so exciting. And what we really want for the space is, obviously at the moment it's still kind of a small endeavor. We're putting on our own work there. We're rehearsing there. We're doing our own kind of in-house development sessions there. Eventually it would be amazing to be kind of a more established venue where we can bring in other work, where we can start to liaise with other companies and stage their work. But for the moment, obviously, it's not only are we up against the COVID-19 crisis, but we're also up against, having something of that scale requires a lot of resources, requires a lot of personnel, and we just don't have that capacity right now. So for the moment, it's just us hanging out in there, making work, doing a lot of readings and playing around, really.
Well, you have been very busy actually, haven't you? Because at the beginning of March, you released an open call for the new Writing Night project. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What the aims of the project are, and what the response was like to it, Hilary?
Yeah, this is kind of my baby. I'm a writer myself, as you mentioned earlier, and I love interacting with other playwrights and hearing their stories and hearing them read out loud. It's a totally magical thing, and something that I've wanted to get involved in for a long time. So when we first started as a company, we had a few new writing night events, and we were really lucky. We connected with amazing writers, a couple of which have gone on to write for us. We connected with Philip Doherty, who's currently working on a project with Fubine for drive-in theater, which is incredible. We worked with Stuart Roach, who's written The Fetch Wilson, which was a huge hit for us. We've taken it to London and Edinburgh. But it was a one-man show, and it's just done so well. Audiences have responded to it incredibly well. So we've been really lucky that there's still interest in it. We just took it up to Belfast to the Lyric most recently. And it's just been a gift that keeps on giving. But Stuart is someone
a good collaboration then, yourselves and Stuart. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And we've got some other things in the works with Stuart. I won't say too much, but we're hoping that later in the year we'll be announcing another Stuart Roach Corps Ensemble collaboration. We kind of made that our focal point, and I really wanted to bring back the new Writing Night project, but I wanted to do it in kind of a bigger, more inclusive way, and I wanted to connect with people that we don't already know, whose work maybe we haven't seen. So we decided to issue this open call, and I thought we might get 6 or 7 writers submitting, which would have been fantastic. We ended up getting over 25, which was great.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great response.
So you've been keeping busy during COVID then, doing a lot of reading.
Yes, so much reading. None of us, like everyone else, none of us had even heard of Zoom before this happened. But now it's like the thing that's keeping us together really is that we've been meeting 2 or 3 times a week for the last probably 2 months. And we're working through reading all of those scripts. So we were really, really excited to put out an open call and just see what happened. And, fortunately, it's been magic. And we're really, really excited. We've made our final 6 selections. And we can't wait to keep working on them. Going to be starting our development sessions with writers, hopefully next week or the week after. And we'll be speaking with them about their scripts and talking about ways that we can develop it and, finding the best part that we can present as sort of a teaser, work in progress excerpt to the public.
Fantastic. And Hilary, you mentioned that you guys as a team have selected and finally decided on the winning submissions for the new Writing Night project. And I understand that you can give us maybe some of those names as an exclusive to Stage Door Live.
I can, yes. The lineup is fantastic, and I'm so excited to present all 6 pieces. We've got some amazing writers who are involved. We're very happy. We're working with Hugh Hick, who's a very well-known playwright already and is a wonderful young voice. And we're working with Pierce McDonough, and we're working with a few other people, but I won't give away all of our secrets. We will actually be announcing the full lineup tomorrow morning on our social media channels. So you can all tune in tomorrow morning and see the full 6 writers.
Fantastic. I'm sure we'll all be very excited to see their work when you guys finally get a chance to present it.
So we're figuring out how to break out of our usual space and go a bit wild with our presentation. So more details about the full summer season coming very soon.
Well, it sounds like you guys have it all figured out and you are not letting anything get in your way and stopping you from putting on all of those amazing performances that we have to look forward to. And I can't wait to see how they turn out. We'll be there with bated breath.
Thanks so much, Kelly.
Thank you very much for joining us, Hilary.
Thanks for that, Kelly and Hilary. Kelly's interview with Hilary was edited for time, so a full-length version of the interview will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days if you're interested in checking that out. And that is all of the news for this week. As always, if you do find any value in Stage Door Live, then please do consider hitting the like button and sharing this broadcast with your friends and your followers. On YouTube, you can hit the subscribe button and the notification icon next to it, which looks like a little bell, and that will ensure that you're kept up to date on our future broadcasts and our YouTube exclusive content. We really do appreciate everyone's support. Our first guests this evening are the playwright Caitriona Daly and director and playwright David Horan. Caitriona is currently under commission with Fish Amble, the new play company, and has several new projects in development with the Abbey Theatre. Along with being artistic director of Bewley's Cafe Theatre, David teaches acting technique at the Lear Academy, and he recently directed This Beautiful Village by Lisa Tierney Kyo at the Abbey in 2019. Which was also scheduled for national tour this year. Welcome to the show, Caitriona and David. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
How are you? I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, you can hear me. Kevin? There's always something every week, but sure. I'm going to see if Kevin can bring in your volume. Can both of you say...
Hi.
Oh, yes.
Hi, you can hear
me? Okay, yeah, I can hear you both now. That's perfect. Lovely. So I'm going to ask my first question to David. David, could you talk a little bit about the process that you have generally in Bewley's? If someone wants to put on a play there, do they submit plays? Are they selected? Or do you kind of look out for plays that you're interested in?
Sure, there's three strands to the way shows enter programmed at Bewley's. Mid-career artists often come to us with ideas, and because they have a track record and because we might know them, we will choose to produce or co-produce those ideas. Whereas the second strand would be emerging artists and regional theatre, regional companies, where the work is already been presented somewhere else. And Bewley's takes a lot of time to scout places like the Fringe, the Seen and Heard Festival, and to try and see work from all around the place. And so we program that work, we platform it so it can be seen by a wider audience. And then the third strand is the work we instigate ourselves. So about a few shows every year are self-produced. And in that instance, we might have the idea, and often that work isn't entirely new. It'll be adaptations of classic work by writers made to work at lunchtime. So a short story by Oscar Wilde, or and then little known or little seen one act plays from classic writers like Shaw or Oscar Wilde or Mary Lavin or somebody like that.
Do you ever have brand new artists just approaching you, kind of saying, oh, I had this idea, or how much would it cost me to put on a show at Bewley's or anything like that?
Yes, very much. We get unsolicited work comes to us all the time. And usually what we say to unsolicited writers in particular now is that we ask them, other theatres and other venues have literary departments, but we're not resourced in that way. So we ask them to potentially approach freelance artists like a freelance director or a leading actor and approach us as a team. And once there's somebody who's vouching for the work in advance, it allows us to be able to engage further. But often if it's a team of young artists starting out, we'll ask them to find another platform first, because it's a very specific audience and the time that where we present work. So we prefer for young artists to dream as big as they want, and if it happens to be good and appropriate rather for Bewley's, then we'll spot it and we'll bring it in.
Great. I'm going to pick up on something you said earlier in your answer, because it'll provide me with a really neat segue to my question for Caitriona. So
yes.
When you said that you kind of scout out people's shows at Dublin Fringe, for example, I'm assuming one of the shows you scouted in a Dublin Fringe in 2017 was Normal by Caitriona Daly. Is that correct?
That is correct. I remember seeing it in a much larger theatre, in the Lear Academy's theatre, and I was blown away by the work. Karen Ardif and Caoimhe O'Malley giving two stunning performances. Yes, a lot of people know that Bewley sponsors an award at the Fringe for the best show under an hour. But the prize is a remount of Bewley's. So it's the best and most appropriate show under an hour that can work in that space. That was just formalizing a relationship that already existed. And in truth, we nominate a lot of shows, and a lot more than the winner ends up returning to Bewley's at other times in the year. And we were delighted to have Caitriona's show reopen the venue when we moved back to Bewley's Cafe after a sojourn in Powers Court Theatre.
Lovely. And to follow on from that, Caitriona, would you tell us a bit about Normal, about how the idea for that play came about, and then the journey of that production from the Lear to Fringe to Bewley's?
Yeah, sure. I suppose I started writing it in 2011, so that's nearly 10 years ago. But I kept developing it over the years. I think I did about 7 or 8 drafts, and I worked as a carer. I used to work as a carer, kind of working with young adults with severe and profound learning difficulties. So I got a lot of inspiration from that. So that's kind of where the story was born out of, and kind of different. It was looking at carers of people with learning difficulties and that kind of thing, and kind of approaches. I don't want to say approaches because that makes it sound like it's planned, but like different attitudes towards towards caring for somebody with particular needs. So yeah, just kept writing drafts for how many years? 6 years. And then eventually we submitted to Fringe, and got a great team on board. And then we were delighted when David was like, "Hey, do you want to do a 3-week run?" So Bewley's was brilliant for that. Yeah, absolutely.
And did you bring the exact show that you did in Fringe then to your extended run at Bewley's, or did you revise it again in any way?
The play itself was I had done enough drafts. I think my director Maisie would have had me strong shot if I said I wanted to do another one. So this set, I'm sure you know the Lear space, like it's massive, and the set really didn't work for Bewley's, because really Bewley's was a perfect venue for Normal, and I think David really knew that as well. Like because it's set in a room, so it couldn't have been more perfect, and it meant we could kind of the audience were kind of in the set, which was a really nice add on to it. And I know for myself watching it, I prefer the production of Bewley so much more, because we could really see Karen and Caoimhe's faces and their reactions, which made it funnier and more totally. Whereas in the Lear, while it looked beautifully dramatic in the Lear, I think you just kind of missed those kind of things.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There aren't as many, especially since losing Theatre Upstairs, and a lot of the spaces are so big. There are not that many intimate venues of that kind in Dublin anymore, really.
Yeah.
So, sorry, were you going to say something?
Sorry. I was going to say, like, intimate venues, like you mentioned theatre upstairs, like what's brilliant about it, particularly when you're starting out, is that like it's not so easy to sell out, but it's quite easy. So like you get this whole add-on, oh, my sold out run in this 34-seater theatre, which is a nice kind of thing to say.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Just the like emotional value of that on artists that are starting out in their career. So, David, could you tell us a bit about how Bewley's is responding to the COVID crisis? Because Bewley's, the cafe, has now shut down. Does that mean that Bewley's is now looking for a new home actively, or are you kind of regrouping?
That's exactly where we are right now. It's a shame what's happened at the cafe, because the Bewleys was always so supportive of new writing and the lunchtime theatre experience. But for the short to medium term now, we're definitely going to have to look for a new home, which we have done before, back when in 2016, when they decided to renovate. We moved to Powers Court very successfully. So we're back talking to them along with a number of other venues. So we're exploring a few different avenues. We were lucky the last time that we had our last performance on Valentine's Day, which was a Saturday in Bewley's Cafe. And on the following Monday, we were able to reopen in the Powers Court Theatre with a new show. So we didn't even miss one performance as a result of the last closing down. But this time, due to coronavirus, it's a different situation. So it's slowing down our movements. But we're feeling very positive about it, and we plan that when theatre reopens, that we'll be in a position to do so as well. So look out for news over the course of the summer, I'd say.
Oh, good. I'm definitely going to be looking out for that, and I'm sure lots of other people are. So I'll go back to Caitriona for a second. It's not that long ago that you were like fresh out of the playwriting course at the Lear, wasn't it, that you did? How did you find kind of navigating the landscape of Dublin as a brand new artist? What do you think it's like for people when they're starting?
Like, I think it's really funny. I think like in this really kind of deadpan way, being like, oh, another session. Like, but I feel a lot more confident in this recession because I went through the last one as a theatre artist as well. So I'm like in a much better place, I suppose. I have to be honest. When I left the Lear, I was in the first year ever. I'm out of it nearly 10 years. Every time I go into the building, it's almost completely unrecognizable to me. There's only about 18 of us there at the time. I had my own office, which is bizarre. But I think I don't really know what the right answer to that question is. I think everybody figures out their own way. Some people are really great at networking and getting to know everybody, and that doesn't suit everybody. It certainly didn't suit me. I think the only thing I can say really is to have confidence in what you're doing. And like with, I try not to sound totally over sentimental, but like if you don't have that self-belief and that kind of faith in, I don't really, if you're constantly looking for other people's validation, I think you need to have a good turn talking to yourself. Like, I mean, I think it's the difference between writing and acting. Like, it's very clear when a play is bad. Like, and not that acting, it's also very clear when acting is good or if it's bad, but there's a whole other world of things that come into the world of acting that don't come into the world of writing. If the play is good, somebody's going to put it on. Do you know what I mean? It'll have an audience. And I think it's more about focusing on your own work. I think the scene gets you can get bogged down in that kind of stuff when actually you just need to be focusing on what it is you're doing really primarily. I hope that answers the question, not sure. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Do you have any, still with Caitriona, do you have any hopes, or do you see anything more that you think that we could be doing as a city to cultivate new work after the pandemic?
I think the pandemic thing is so new. I don't think any of us really know what on earth is going to happen how we're supposed to adapt to it. But I really assume we'll figure that out. Like, I think what's for me anyway as a writer, I'm very much like this whole streaming thing and filming work. I'm like, if I wanted to write a film, I'd write a film. It's trying to figure out what theatre looks like through this medium. And I fear I'll only come up with the answer as theatres reopen. But it's kind of about that really. But yeah, I think that's it. Creative minds and all that. So yeah,
totally. And David, can I ask you the same question? Really, is there anything you hope for or would like to see in the cultivation of new work in Dublin going forward?
Well, you were talking earlier about small theatres, and I suppose the advantage of small theatres is that we can take the risk probably on new work. So as I was saying, Bewley's doesn't have a literary department, so we don't have the resources to always get dramaturgically down and dirty with new writers. A lot of what we'll present will already be, we feel, hopefully ready to go, in that we've seen it already or that it has been tried somewhere else. But it is a very important thing to put on new writing, and I think statistics show that we have put on more new plays in the last decade than any other theatre in Ireland, and I think is an important part of a dramaturgical process for any writer to actually see how their writing moves an audience, so it's an important part. What I would say is the more we put on, the less pressure we put on each individual play, because they can speak to each other, because an entire company's output isn't beholden to one writer and one worldview. If we produce less, then they really all have to succeed. Now, Bewley's tries to make sure that every show on our stage succeeds, but I do think that maybe we've found it easier to platform work, because if this show doesn't quite hit the heights, then the next one's coming along very quickly after it.
Yeah.
That said, we'd like to get involved in more dramaturgical support, and it's something we're looking into doing. I also think the more good plays we see, the more playwrights will rise to the challenge. But yeah, one of the fallouts of the last recession was that there was less risk taken, and then the dramaturgy gets smaller because people think that all plays have to be one and two-handers and the like.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we find a way of recovering differently this time and going forward bolder and more excited to take risks, maybe. So that's all that we have time for, sadly. I did have another question, but we've had nice chats. So I'd like to say thank you so much to both of you for coming on and for speaking so nicely for the episode today. Bye.
Thank you for having us, Amy.
Our first Art in Isolation this week is a little bit different to our previous features for this segment. We wanted to keep the conversation going about the importance of producing theatres in Ireland. So our guest correspondent, Kelly O'Doherty, met with dramaturg Pamela McQueen earlier this week to discuss the great work the new theatre has done and continues to do for artists in Ireland.
Hello all, and welcome to this special report for Stage Door Live, and I am delighted to be joined by Pamela McQueen from the New Theatre. Pamela, how are you keeping?
Good, yeah. Busy enough, but good.
I can see there from your lovely artwork in the back that you've been busy at home with the kids.
Yes, absolutely. So the homeschool juggle with a little bit of continuing to work on developing scripts with writers and some mentorship projects, and a sort of little bit of juggling of reimagining what projects could be in our new COVID reality, you know?
Yes, that's fantastic. And Pamela, as you mentioned there, in addition to your freelance work, you are a dramaturg at the New Theatre, a theatre whose mission it is to support the development of emerging and established writers, which it has been doing now for over 2 decades. Pamela, could you tell us a little bit about what makes the new theatre unique in the theatre sector in Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose unique is sort of a kind of consideration of where we exist in the kind of ecology of Irish theatre, if you see what I mean. So we'd be aware of working with playwrights and trying to kind of, particularly emerging playwrights, trying to help them, support them as they enter their career paths through their first productions, their early productions. And I suppose one of the things that we think a lot about in terms of less our uniqueness, but more our place in the ecology of Irish theatre. So we like to work with as many people as possible. So, for example, with the Seen and Heard Festival, which is a wonderful development of new work festival that's run by Cueva Conley and Cliona Dukes down in Seen and Heard, we would regularly kind of keep contact with them, and then we would support new writers coming out of that festival to develop their short piece, which is usually about 10-15 minutes, into a full-length play of an hour or more, to have what is often their first full professional stage production. So, for example, last year we did a production called Gone by Annie Keegan, which came through that route to us. So from a 15-minute piece, I would have worked with Annie and developed an expanded draft, then done notes and a table read with actors, and then I went through a further drafting process, and it became a very, very funny play that ran with us very successfully to good audiences, about the alternative imagining of the life of Maud Gonne. She had a platform then for her first production where she could invite theatre industry professionals. So I know that one of my colleagues, Rebecca Mayers from the Lyric in Belfast, came to see that show. And subsequently, Annie applied for and became part of the new playwrights programme in Belfast at the Lyric, and is now currently on the working with Druid as a developing artist as well down in Galway. So yeah, the new theatre looks at itself as a unique producing house, but also a way for writers to connect with the wider ecology of Irish theatre.
We had Angus Oak McAnally speaking to us on Stage Door Live a while ago, and he spoke about how the new theatre and Smock Alley were like starter venues where, you know, a theatre maker wouldn't have to have the guts of €5,000 in their back pocket to get their work seen. If you guys obviously didn't provide that platform, we would be denied, you know, seeing, or I suppose losing a chance to connect with a diverse group of voices. So do you feel there's a need for more venues like the New Theatre and Smock Alley around the Republic and in Dublin?
I mean, yes, definitely. There is a need for support of our emerging artists and new work coming through. There's, you know, putting together a play, any play, but particularly a new play where you're also developing the script simultaneously, is a complex engagement with, you know, a lot of a wide collaborative team. And so those venues need to be there, but they also need to be financially supported to actually enable the production of that work, you know? So one of the things that the New Theatre does is it's incredibly economical, you know? But you come to the New Theatre and we can give you the benefit of the resource of the building. So that might be some free rehearsal space. It's then coming in with the technical support. It's the fact that our box office is there with the Take Your Seats company. And then there's a marketing support there to promote your show, both, you know, within the industry for reviewers and to the wider public and the New Theatre audience. So that scaffolding has to be available.
Yeah.
All those elements to bring a show together and to get them to the stage. Very often in the beginning and in the early days, it's hard to navigate that process, you know? So we're there to help with those supports in the immediate sense, and then to give that introduction to professional practice and what's required to making a show at that level, you know? So yes, there is a need for more venues, but also for those venues to have a decent amount of funding to provide that kind of full package for emerging artists. When you are a writer finding your voice 1, 2, 3 plays in, whatever it is. You have to take risks to discover the type and the aesthetic of the theatre that you want to make, that will be your voice, So there's no point in you making something that you think might sell, because that's not going to be a way for you to find your original voice,
Obviously, we're living in very strange, unprecedented times at the moment. How have you been working with artists to reconfigure or adapt existing projects that were due to go on in the theatre?
The very first thing, in some sense, was there was an element of shock, wasn't there? And, to sort of hold your nerve almost was the first thing, to keep writing, to keep looking at deadlines, to keep moving towards those deadlines, because we didn't really know what we were dealing with. And now I think we're beginning to understand a little bit more about the time frame. So it's kind of a choice between continuing on the path you're on, or with that particular piece of work, or looking at perhaps writing in response to the events, and then also looking at what medium we're writing for. So some of the digital stuff is wonderful, and it's great to see some rapid response writing, but maybe we need to start thinking about how you write for those digital platforms specifically. And then also, of course, to continue in the traditional mode of stage writing, because there will be a point when we return from this, at whatever stage that is. I think what all theatres may face as we go forward is maybe how much we are able to produce, in terms of the amount,
That's an interesting point that you're making there, Pamela, because obviously spaces are under threat now for, of financial ruin, as it were. Is there a way that the public can support the new theatre now during this time, and other spaces like it?
I mean, in the most immediate sense, you can become a friend of the new theatre. Maybe just thinking about the future as it emerges, kind of being brave enough to support theatres by going back to them, and then also maybe thinking about in the wider picture that I think ultimately it'll be very necessary to have some special one-off government support for venues as well as for individual artists. And so that is going to be a campaign, as indeed the National Campaign for the Arts is already in action on this topic, and that members of the public can actually, express their urgency about this issue to their own TDs and to their own councillors, whether that's on social media or by emailing them or whatever. And it's important for the politicians to understand that it's not only artists who are concerned about this, but also the public. The public and the audience members don't want to lose those venues.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because, obviously we always think in terms of how can we support financially, but there are other ways. There's ways of supporting within the community. Get in touch with the local TD, as you say, and push and try and get support for our venues it's just hugely important for the arts, and the arts need to continue to thrive, and especially venues like the new theatres. But thank you so much for talking to us today, Pamela. It's been really lovely, interesting chat, and I wish you all the best now with your upcoming projects and keeping the faith and keeping theatre alive and going. It's very important work that you're doing. And is it still can we still support those pieces that are on takeyourseats.ie, or is it still an option to donate?
It's still possible to view them. Yeah, they're all there. And as I say, either through that platform or by becoming a friend of the new theatre, which we equally like. We love to have friends.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hello all, and welcome to this special report.
Thanks to Kelly and to Pamela for having a chat with us there. As before, that interview was edited for time, but a full-length version of that interview will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. Of course, we will provide a link in the description after the show for how you can get in touch with the new theatre and hopefully some of you will consider becoming their friend. Now, I am particularly excited to introduce our next guest and the announcement that we will be discussing. He is the playwright and director Peter Reid, and Peter has created and curated something called the 25-Minute Play Project. This will be a selection of newly written pieces and will be taking place at the International Bar in August. And the reason that I am particularly excited to share this with you is because I am involved in it myself, and I have kindly been invited to write and perform in one of the pieces. So welcome, Peter. Can't wait to chat with you about this.
Hi. I'm sort of stunned that it's called the 25-minute plays. Can you hear me?
Is it? Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Is that what it's what it's called?
No,
I
haven't. I swear to God, I haven't got a name for it yet. It's still such a fresh idea, and it was such a rush to do something that it never got named. But so the idea was 25-minute plays because 25 minutes gives the playwright enough time to actually develop an idea, but not enough time to allow an audience to get bored. And I can stick on 3 of them in a row. I can also socially distance everyone. I can socially distance the actors. So the idea was basically I couldn't see a way forward how we'd get back to the stage, and that was enormously depressing. And when you need to get back to the stage, you kind of go, all right, what can we do? So you go back to basics. And so I thought the International Bar, I know John, who owns the bar. I rang him. I explained a huge amount, and he just went, yeah, grand. And that was it. And it was as simple as that. And so I have a space. I'm able to, so I rang, contacted a lot of writers, and yourself included. And the take-up was enormous. It was, I think I contacted 20 people, and 18 said yes. So, yeah. So
and
I ended up with go on.
Can I ask you, are you allowed to say any of those names yet? Obviously, I've already said that I'm one of them.
Yeah. I whizzed through a quick list. Yeah. So Deacon Innes, given one, Jimmy Murphy, Ken Harmon, Gary Duggan, Stuart Roach, Katie McCann, Jim Breen, Finbar Doyle, Rodrigo Turnavoy, Amy Kidd, with Tarantino, Ciara Elizabeth Smith, David Butler, Pom Boyd, Sean Walsh, Lisa Walsh, Paul Elliott, and Adele Murphy, Rose Henderson. And,
you really
and today, but I have to, because there's so many. And today, I think Gavin Kostick said he wanted to throw his hat in the ring. So, so it's become very interesting, and there's a lot of interesting actors getting involved, interesting directors, and so I'm kind of lucky,
And can I ask you? So our kind of hashtag for this episode is all about cultivating new work and new artists. And you've mixed some really well-established names with a couple of brand new, lesser known or totally unknown artists. Was that a very conscious decision to do that, to mix the two?
Yeah, it was very deliberate. There was a couple of people I know who are well known. There's a couple of people who maybe they might kill me for saying it, but mid-career. And there's people in there who are completely unknown. And there are people involved who I haven't even met, who I know nothing about, and they came as suggestions. And once they pitched their idea, I just said, right, okay, there's going to be a range of stuff in there from there's going to be a short musical. There's going to be a drag act. There's going to be a piece that's interactive. There's going to be there's a piece from it's a piece about World War II.
So a really exciting mix of kind of styles and themes, different kinds of voices.
No one has doubled up. And I read your piece, of course, but probably best not to.
We can talk about it off the
but nobody has doubled up, and I think I've got 2 musicals actually. But they're very interesting how everyone approached it, and they were given the brief, 2 actors, no set, nothing. You got 25 minutes to tell a human story, preferably not COVID related, and they've all come back with these amazing tales. So I'm just blown away. Because I honestly didn't expect the return, and now I have to go and put them all on.
So could you talk through, just for people at home that are curious, how it's all going to work in terms of social distancing? So from rehearsal through to, if anyone at home would really love to, buy a ticket, come and see it, there are going to be some live audience members, which I think some people will be excited to hear. But do you want to talk through that whole kind of how COVID's going to affect the arc of the project?
Okay, so the whole idea was that a lot of the videoed stuff, the self-taping, no offense to anyone who's self-taping for the Abbey or whatever, but one of the things that it occurred to me that the difference was that the kinetic energy between the audience and the actor was changed, and so I thought they need an audience, even if it's a small audience. So that's why I came to the International. I thought I can place 10 people in there. If I can move people to, say, a seat with a tea light and go, that is your seat, and you're distanced, and the actors are distanced upstairs, and everyone is, the place is deep cleaned, all the rest of it. But I thought I can get a two-hander on, and the reason for a two-hander is because there's so many monologues that are going on.
Going on at the moment,
yeah, pretty much.
And we're missing connection, not just with each other, but seeing 2 people connect on stage, even if they're far apart. I think people are craving that.
Yeah, but there's this huge difference in the audience. Once you have an audience, even if you're live streaming, the connection between the audience, even the viewer on live stream, feels a difference between the actor and the audience, as opposed to say just performing screen, which can be kind of dry, or it's what it is, it's but that was the idea, and I thought I could do it, and I can, and it'll be the end of August, and probably look like it's going to run into September and October at this stage, because there were so many people who took up, and there's so many plays. So at the moment, it's it's a real goer, and I've been speaking to people, talking to Mark O'Brien out in Axis, and just asking advice from various people, and everyone's been really supportive. John O'Brien, who's been giving me kind of advice on, the finances and everything else, and I'm pulling every string to try and get as many people as possible on side. So, and everyone's been really generous with their time and their energy and their commitment, and on what is essentially a kind of crackpot idea,
So we have time for just one more quick question. So I wondered if you'd talk a little bit, because one of the things that we're talking about this week is new spaces for cultivating new artists. And the International Bar, it's kind of, my understanding of it anyway, is that it's definitely nowadays seen much more as a comedy venue, but that it used to be a bit more of a kind of fringe theatre, experimental work, new voices. And obviously I wasn't around to see that for myself, but I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about kind of what it used to be in Dublin as a venue.
The international, sorry, you're just making me laugh at the idea you weren't even born, but
I might have been born. I just too small to take myself there.
The international was it was a starting point for so many people. Jimmy Fay started there. Him and Ken Harmon performed Zoo's Story there, directed by the filmmaker Terry McMahon, back in '96. Around the same time, you had Conor McPherson, who was performing his own one-man shows upstairs. With Mark O'Brien would have been part of that company. Mark O'Brien, who runs Axis, Jason Byrne would have been involved in that. Conor Lovett, I remember seeing Conor Lovett of Gare Saint-Lazare. He was the first night I saw him. He was playing to 3 people. It was me and 2 others, and he was doing the Fringe show, and he was doing Malloy by Beckett. And 10 years later, he was in the Lincoln Centre doing the same thing. Of course, I suppose the big flashy one would be Cillian Murphy in Disco Pigs. Cork came up, and nobody heard of Cork at the time. Nobody knew who they were. Nobody knew who Pat Kernan was. And they come up at this show, and I managed to get a seat on this packed show for something I knew nothing about, and nobody knew who Enda Walsh was. Nobody knew any of that, and suddenly I was punched in the back of the head by Cillian Murphy. As they took to the stage, and that was what they did. They walked on and they slapped everyone. I'm not sure they get away with it today, but
no, I think health and safety.
But it was Cillian Walsh and or Cillian Murphy and Eileen Walsh, and it was an amazing experience in a very small space. On what I mean, Enda Walsh now is like global, isn't he? So I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff has gone on in that place.
So maybe it's in the walls. The beginning of a reignition of that kind of identity for the International Bar. Who knows?
Well, we can try and tell stories and do it again, and we're forced into a situation where we can't sit close to each other, and we can't have actors embrace, or we can't have any of that. So I just think we're trying to move into a thing where it's 2 people tell a story, move it on. It kind of goes back to basics, in many ways.
Great. That is all we have time for. That was lovely. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting about that. And I'm sure people can find out more information about the project, which is not called 25-minute plays, very soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Now, our Art in Isolation segment this week features Chaos Factory. They are an exciting and experimental Dublin-based theatre company who first hit our stages with their debut production, Kiss Kiss Slap Slap, which premiered in the Dublin Fringe in 2018. And they have just celebrated their 2nd birthday. So let's see what they've been up to.
Hi, we're Chaos Factory, made up of Daniel Galligan, Venetia Bowe, Vanilla Gigax, and myself, Rachel Bergen. We founded in 2018 when we debuted our first production, Kiss Kiss Slap Slap, as part of Dublin Fringe Festival.
So, for those of you who are not familiar with the term stealthing, the definition is condom removal during session.
Excuse me, covert condom removal.
We make devised work, often influenced by movement, visual art and performance art. We work collaboratively, so although the girls are performers and I'm a producer, we're all the writers and directors of our work. After our initial process, we then bring in movement directors and designers to work with us in a non-hierarchical structure to develop the work. We're always really excited about working with lots of different artists from all art forms.
So following Kiss Kiss Slap Slap in 2018, we already had started to bat a few ideas back and forth for our next project, and one theme that we all found particularly resonant as a company was the theme of body image. So that idea then we began to excavate towards the end of 2018, and by 2019 we kind of settled on the idea for a new show called Morph Me. So we began to develop that in 2019. I think we spent 3 weeks in April together in a room with our designers and with a movement director and with another performer actually devising the show, and that version of Morph Me was then performed as a work in progress in Live Collision in 2019. And I think we found the Live Collision performance really invaluable because of the direct feedback you get from the audience. So being able to have such a cross section of opinions and being able to then channel them back into the show was a real gift, because we had the luxury of time that we were able to let the ideas kind of marinate and ruminate and expand in ways that we hadn't anticipated. So yeah, by the start of 2019 we were ready, well not ready, but we were getting ready to premiere Morph Me. So we would have been in our final week of rehearsals right now this week, and we would be getting ready to unleash it onto the world next week, the first week of June in Cube in Project Arts Centre. So obviously it's a bit disappointing that we can't do that right now, but we've just been postponed until 2021. So I think, yeah, having this time has made us realise that we are even more kind of hungry and eager to get the work up and for it to find its audience. So watch this space.
So at the beginning of lockdown, we were meant to be in development for our show Morph Me, and we wanted to stay committed to that because we didn't know how long lockdown was going to go on at the time, and so we wanted to be ready and to have the work made if it came to, you know, us being back in a room or being back in rehearsals with shorter notice than we had intended. And so we committed to 3 weeks every morning between an hour and a half and 2 hours together on Zoom, in which we would take a section of the show and just pick it apart in terms of themes, aesthetics, you know, physical movement, text. And in that way, I suppose we were kind of building the show imaginatively of what we thought it might look like, which was exciting and actually really unlocked something for us. I think in that time we really fell in love with the show, and it got somewhere that it hadn't gotten before. And in terms of the theme, you know, we made big discoveries and it kind of clicked for us what we were trying to do and the intention of the show. We'd also leave some tasks for each other every day, so we'd go off in the evening and do a physical response to something or write a bit of text, and then we bring it back to the group the next day. So in that way we're kind of building the show imaginatively, but it did reach a point, I think 3 weeks in, and we were just getting tired of the talking, and it felt like we can't go any further without being in a room together. And so we decided to park it for the sake of the show, but we didn't want to just lie dormant as a company then. So we have since then been doing a lot of ruminating and thinking and gathering of materials for new ideas. So we've 1 or 2 or 3 new ideas that we want to develop in 2021, and we have a big Google Drive in which we're always throwing texts and visual imagery and performance art and anything we can find into this drive to try and build an aesthetic for a new show. And you know, things we're thinking a lot about is, you know, what is it going to look like in the landscape post-COVID, and, you know, in terms of space, we're thinking a lot about space. Our 2 other shows were made for a theatre space, and we're now kind of thinking about that and the possibility of that, and we're also thinking a lot about physical touch and lack of communication as themes. But yeah, I think actually COVID has has shifted our gears a little bit in a different direction, which we're going to kind of start exploring properly now next week. But space is going to be a big thing that we're thinking about. Yeah, watch this space.
You can keep updated on our work and what we're up to during lockdown via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. Our handle is @FactoryChaos, or you can go onto our website chaosfactorytheatre.com and sign up to our newsletter.
So happy second birthday to Chaos Factory, and we can't wait to see what kind of wonderful chaos they create later in the year. Our last guest this evening is award-winning writer and director Sara Joyce, from Ireland but now based in the UK. Most recently, she was the staff director at the National Theatre for Lucy Kirkwood's The Welkin. As an associate director and assistant director, she has worked with Dominic Dromgoole, Claire Van Kampen, Gavin Quinn, Richard Eyre, Rupert Gould and Stephen Marmion. Welcome to Stage Door Live, Sara. Hi. How are you today?
Hi. Yeah, I'm good. I'm a bit hot, but I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm also a bit hot, especially with I have a light on me. But yeah, so we'll jump right in. Let's go straight in with what made you decide to leave Ireland after you studied at Trinity. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, I did the drama and theatre degree at Trinity.
At the Samuel Beckett?
At the Samuel Beckett Centre, yeah. So it was the degree course, not the acting. So they did have an acting course at one point. And I originally just wanted to act, and then got into directing in my sort of final year, taught by David Horan, actually. And yeah,
I was also taught by David Horan, and we had him on the show today. All the connections.
Yes, he's great, and loved that. And then I because I had the chance in Trinity to kind of be experimenting with direction, I found that I was very interested in the physical body, basically, and I guess work that what started me being interested was reading about plays that I hadn't that were just so weird. So we were reading Carol Churchill and Anthony Nielsen. That sort of period of In Your Face became a real interest of mine, and I guess I had loved the work of Pan Pan as well, the Corps Exchange, Calypso, when they were still around. And a lecturer at the time asked me if I knew about Jacques Lecoq in Paris, which is a physical theatre school. And so I ended up going there because I just wanted to know. I was curious about I was curious about challenging the idea of the literary culture of theatre that I think is really prevalent in Ireland, in a great way, because we have so many brilliant writers. But I think it can be a bit kind of stiff and a bit, I suppose, a bit naturalistic. It's just not my style. I love magic and I love kind of really weird stuff. So that's sort of why. And then after Paris, I went to London, which I kind of always knew I was going to go to London, I guess. Just felt like there was more opportunity there.
And when do you think you made that decision? Was it based on the acting opportunities specifically, or not acting, but the arts work opportunities in London compared with Dublin?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think, if I'm really honest, I think I found Ireland to be quite small in its kind of in what I identified as a circle of makers, which was, in part true and in part naive of me, but I couldn't see many opportunities for learning. I also, probably at that time I can't think of, beyond Gary Hines, there were very few practicing female directors as well, and still are, really. But there's sort of an evolution of, say, with Selena Cartmel and you know, Annie Ryan is kind of finally getting the credit I think she was always due. But so I think it was really about, for me, it was about learning and about curiosity, and it was where I was going to potentially be able to have I guess something that would allow me to learn more about different types of work, because that was what I was interested in, and also not just practicing the work but seeing the work. I found you know, that you can just go to see so many different things in London. So that was partially why.
What was it like so you went from the Samuel Beckett to Jacques Lecoq in Paris and then to London. When you arrived in London, did you have any arts connections there already? Or were you just completely forging all those?
Zero.
From ground zero?
Yeah, zero.
Nothing.
No, I mean, probably more than I thought initially. I know that like there's quite a few of us now from Trinity College over there. So I have my contemporaries who sort of like dripped over, a lot of people who were studying acting. But no, in terms of the places. So initially, like I worked in retail. I worked in Harrods for about a year, just kind of knocking on doors. And then eventually, you know, I would write everywhere. And eventually, because I had done a play in the Samuel Beckett by Anthony Neilson for my final year show, I did The Wonderful World of Dissociate. I'd actually written to him. I wrote to everybody, but I'd written to him, and he did meet me in London, and we happened to meet in the Soho Theatre. And he was like, "Do you know Steve Marmion?" And that was about like that happened. And then about a year later, I was in the Soho Theatre seeing a show, and they just announced a new Anthony Neilson production. And I went up to Steve Marmion and I was like, "I don't know if you remember me, I'm really." And then the next day they called and said, "Would you like to assist on it?" Now, for whatever reason, that kind of sounds like it happened out of nowhere, but I was kind of
sowing
pushing.
the seeds,
and so that, yeah, exactly. But it took me that long, which is, I think, often sort of skirted over the amount of time it takes to sort of get anywhere. It took me a good year at least to sort of get that first assisting job, and then from
that
there it was kind of
overnight success.
Yeah, it's just not true. Yeah, and it's still true. You know, even now I still am writing to people and places and chasing work. So yeah.
And during that time when you were working in Harrods and you were first in London, did you do any kind of fringe or kind of emergent work?
Yes, I did. It took me, again, I was doing little bits in these kind of, I guess what would be equivalents of the New Theatre, maybe a little smaller. I did a sort of like very small show in Dalston, and then my very first thing was a trio of Beckett plays in a quite well-renowned theatre called the Old Red Lion, which is sort of known for new writing. And that was great. And then sort of formed a connection with them. And so then did another play. I think like it's probably important to stress that like at that I was making that work exactly like you say while I was working. The second show I made, The Wind Bin, which was at the Old Red Lion, I was actually assisting at that point at the Almeida Theatre. I was a resident director, and I couldn't turn that job down. But what happened was I would go to do 9 till like 6 or however long you had to stay on. Sometimes you had to do writing notes. And then I would run across to Camden where we had a rehearsal space. We were rehearsing. The London Irish Centre gave us space in kind. And then I'd run across and work 7 to 10 directing that.
Yeah.
So it was all kind of, I guess I'm saying that because I think it was just interesting listening to the other guests talking like about the New Theatre and Bewley's Cafe and stuff, and that it's such a difficult thing because those small venues can't support artists financially, and so essentially what it means you have to have is artists finding a way to sustain themselves and make the work. But that's what happened, and it kind of it sort of looped from there. And then I did Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and you know, it started to build, but it took a while. I feel old.
And you mentioned that your contemporaries are in London now. Did you have any colleagues from your Trinity days, peers, I suppose, not colleagues, that were kind of living a parallel to you, in Dublin still, that were trying to establish themselves in the same way here?
I think I know plenty of writers and plenty of actors, less directors actually of a similar age to me. I don't know why that is. There was another sort of like brilliant director in my year who she started actually in Dublin. So that was Rosemary McKenna, and she did the Seeds program, and she she essentially was on the same sort of path. We were exactly the same age, we're still very good friends actually. And she was kind of doing everything here, and she had gone in a certain point, and then she moved, and she left because she just found she hit a wall. She's but that's not to say, you know, I don't know, that's not to say if she had stayed she wouldn't have kind of maybe built something else. I think it just wasn't right for her anymore to be here. But I know I know I can't speak on her behalf. But yeah, that was interesting to see. And at one point I remember feeling like, oh, she's doing so much better than I am because she stayed. There was like, it felt like she accelerated to somewhere that allowed her to do more larger scale work before I could get there, if that makes sense.
Do you think that is just because it's a smaller industry, or do you think, like, that's one thing that I've noticed it's an interesting perspective, I suppose, because you are from Ireland and moved to London, and I grew up not far from London in Brighton and moved to Ireland. So we're kind of reverse perspectives with that. But when you said about bigger scale and production values and things, I think one thing I've noticed is that there's not that kind of middle production value work, that it doesn't go on as frequently here as in the UK. I don't know if I'm expressing that quite right, but I feel like it's either kind of full budget or complete nothing, but it doesn't have that middle ground that you see quite a lot of in. Did that make any sense? It probably did.
No, it makes complete sense. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I almost think like an easier way of thinking about it is kind of thinking about audience capacity as opposed to budget. So it feels like the sort of work that has more resource behind it is saved for the bigger audiences. Let's take, for example, what you were just saying with Peter Reid about something like an experience of Disco Pigs, which by its nature as a play is written to be quite an intimate experience. It doesn't, but it requires the integrity of work, the sort of rehearsal process, the time, the dramaturgy of any other play. So I think it's like, I think sometimes we think about theatre in the wrong way, but not you, like as in the industry feels like it's so preoccupied with the transactional nature of theatre because of course it has to make money. And artists as well, you know, I've been guilty of this, I still am guilty of it, where you see is the utopia the main stage of a national theatre, and yet that isn't the right way to think about making work, because when you get a play or you have an idea, really what you need to be thinking about is the right space for the work.
Not just aiming everything at one. Because we want variety. We want to know life isn't the same, people aren't the same, people's experiences aren't the same, and so the theatre that we create shouldn't reflect. We want that difference. And what you said then about in terms of audiences, I think then harked back to something I think it was David Horan said earlier about when it's smaller audiences, people can take more risks, and all about the revenue then again, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I hate that word risk. I understand where it comes from, but it's sort of become this sort of like get out of jail free card for a lot of like gatekeepers in industries. That's not having a go at David. I love you, David. Sorry. It's like, but I just mean, I suppose that, like, I think that if artists are going to have the word risk thrown at them, that word risk needs to be qualified with something more than bums on seats. It just doesn't rack up to my mind. Like, if you make good work, people will come. We cannot underestimate audiences. The Edinburgh Fringe Festival is a fantastic example of that, because you have the sense of word of mouth, and you have like it feels sometimes like we buy into this idea of like, oh look, this artist is exceptional and they were discovered and they happened to be in that tiny venue. It's not, that isn't the case. It's that they had an opportunity and a platform to present their work, and it's not that there's a limited number of exceptional and talented artists, it's that there's a limited number of opportunities. And I think it suits a huge percentage of gatekeepers, or the sort of I still think we have a problem with elitism in theatre, and in the UK and in Ireland, and I think that it upholds that to talk about risk in as easy a way as it does. I'm having a vent now, I'll stop.
No, it's an interesting vent. This is exactly the space we want the vent. So I'm going to ask you one more question, kind of to wrap it all up. What do you think you, as a young theatre maker, would have wanted to see in Dublin? If you were to have started your career here and forged it here, now that you've had your experiences in Paris and in London to draw from, what would you hope for the industry here?
I think it's about a investment in that, what I'm talking about, of like good work and not giving up on it. So I guess what I mean is I can't help but think about all those companies who lost their funding in that, that this is like kind of, harking back years back. And those are the kind of companies and artists who I suppose massively inspired me. I'm talking about Michael Murphy, Blue Raincoat, Calypso, as I mentioned. And I think that the work that they were making, albeit on its kind of small level, was so important and so exciting and so innovative. And you're looking at like Complicité started like that, and Frantic Assembly started like that. And for some reason we stymie the sort of development of those companies, those artists. I'm pointing at companies, but I think it stands for artists as well. Why is it that we sort of have only super established writers on stages who've forged a career outside of Ireland? And then we have the best history of writers like in the world, and yet there's no sort of home or space for writers here. I know so many writers, and they where can they go? I think it's not, that comes back to the word, it's not good enough to say, oh well, audiences don't want to see it. That's not true. I think if the work is good enough and it's invested in and given time, we just need to believe in the artists. As sort of, fluffy as that sounds, I think that we have a responsibility to believe in those artists and help them.
I think it cuts straight to just that belief in our in our upcoming artists, and that there are more stories, and that they will be told well, and that if we support the telling of them, we'll continue this legacy. And yeah, my sentence completely trailed off there.
No, it was a great sentence. Don't apologise.
It seems like a great moment to have these conversations, though, while the world's on pause, to kind of take stock, recalibrate, and think about how we can make a better world and art sector to support the telling of those stories. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's okay that theatre is on pause at the minute as well. I think that we're seeing like a great sort of rush of online content in a fantastic way. It's so amazing to see how innovative people are. But I also think that there's something magical about being in a space with people and sharing the experience of something right in front of you that's live. And there's something to treasure about that, and to think about how, not how we can make stuff right now to capitalize on this moment, but think about how we can be looking in the future and how we can provide that feeling of community again.
Yeah. What a good note to end on. So thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on Stage Door Live tonight. I hope you have a nice rest of your evening. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
As the National Campaign for the Arts points out in its 13-point plan, the arts are everywhere. We use the arts to interpret and make sense of our place in the world. And now, as we begin to recover, our world has changed, and we have a lot to make sense of. All the personal struggles that COVID has brought to people, and the changes in the way we make work as artists, and how our audiences will see that work. Yes, the arts sector is inequitably invested in. But that bit's not new. It has always been underfunded. But perhaps we should take this moment, this point of global change, and use it to take positive and progressive action towards supporting artists, to enable and properly fund artists to create and innovate, to fund the existing established venues across Ireland in a more sustainable way, and also to create and fund some new spaces that support and develop fledgling artists at that early stage of their careers. For far too long, we have seen smaller fringe or developmental venues disappear from the map. The loss of Theatre Upstairs was not so long ago. But these are the spaces the upcoming generation of theatre makers grow and learn in. The spaces where young actors, maybe fresh graduates of the Lear or the Gaiety School of Acting, might perform in their first professional show. The spaces where designers get to test out their ideas, and where directors figure out how to find the drama for the very first time. Historically, Ireland is known for artistic excellence. It's always been a part of the culture. And yet, we currently see the lowest levels of funding per capita in Europe. Also historically, our industry sees so many great Irish artists leaving, like Sarah, to make their careers elsewhere, in an attempt to survive when they don't believe the work or the support is here for them. And this is devastating, not only to our sector here, but to the country known both at home and abroad for its great art, and for the enrichment that that art provides the world over. The last few months have taught anyone that may have doubted it that the arts are absolutely needed and necessary. They have gotten people through this pandemic in a lot of ways, and I'm sure they'll also get us through all of the changes to come. So one last reminder to hit the like button and share this broadcast on Facebook. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell next to it on YouTube to be kept up to date on our future broadcasts. Give us a like and a mention on Twitter, and thank you for all of your support. And that's it for Stage Door Live tonight. So, here to say goodnight with a reading of an excerpt from Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman is the wonderful Morgan Cooke. Morgan is an actor, composer, multi-instrumentalist and singing teacher. He is head of singing at the Lear Academy and was recently in Moonfish Theatre's production of Redemption Falls at the Peacock Theatre. So good night, everyone. I'll leave you with Morgan, and I hope to see you next week at 7 p.m. Good night.
Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for asking me to do this. I'm not one of those people that kind of has poems in my back pocket that I just pull out for whatever occasion. I do that with songs, but you asked for a poem, so I was delighted to go through my limited supply of poetry books today to try and find something. So I looked at some Ginsberg, and I looked at some Synge, and I looked at some French poetry, and I looked at some Walt Whitman. And the passage I'm going to read out to you is from Leaves of Grass. It's chapter 42, and what it evoked in me, what it kind of set alight in me, was how it's going to feel when we can all be together again. And I'm touching the wood on my kitchen table, hoping that that will be quite soon, as things are looking better than we'd expected. Either way, it won't be too long before we can hang out outdoors and devise and discuss and bounce ideas and have fun with them. So this is Walt Whitman. A call in the midst of the crowd, my own voice, orotund, sweeping and final. Come, my children, come, my boys and girls, and my women and household and intimates. Now the performer launches his nerve. He has passed his prelude on the reeds within. Easily written, loose-fingered chords, I feel the thrum of their climax and close. My head evolves on my neck. Music rolls, but not from the organ. Folks are around me, but they are no household of mine. Ever the hard and unsunk ground, ever the eaters and drinkers, ever the upward and downward sun, ever the air and the ceaseless tides. Ever myself and my neighbours, refreshing and wicked and real. Ever the old inexplicable query, ever that thorned thumb, that breath of itches and thirsts. Ever the vexer's hoot hoot, till we find where the sly one hides and bring him forth. Ever love, ever the sobbing liquid of life, ever the bandage under the chin, ever the trestles of death. Here and there, with dimes on the eyes walking, to feed the greed of the belly, the brains liberally spooning. Tickets buying, or taking, or selling, but into the feast never once going. Many sweating and ploughing and thrashing, and then the chaff for payment receiving, a few idly owning, and they the wheat continually claiming. This is the city, and I am one of the citizens. Whatever interests the rest interests me. Politics, churches, newspapers, schools, benevolent societies, improvements, banks, tariffs, steamships, factories, markets, stocks and stores, and real estate and personal estate. They who piddle and patter here in collars and tailed coats, I am aware who they are, and that they are not worms or fleas. I acknowledge the duplicates of myself under all the scrape-lipped and pipe-legged concealments. The weakest and shallowest is deathless with me. What I do and say, the same waits for them. Every thought that flounders in me, the same flounders in them. I know perfectly well my own egotism, and know my omnivorous words, and cannot say any less, and would fetch you, whoever you are, flush with myself. See you all very soon.